So this is going to raise some serious questions for us. And these are the questions that they're not really asked, they're more levied.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And the questions are ultimately, did God bless Jephthah for sacrificing his daughter?
Yes.
Yes, that's the question.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. That's the question. Yeah. No, I'm not answering. Sorry. No, about to throw this whole podcast out of whack. Yeah. No.
And we're done. Okay. And did the author of Hebrews praise Jephthah for sacrificing his daughter?
Right.
So first things first, that we kind of have to address, we've already talked about it in previous podcasts. Go back and listen. Go back and watch it.
Right.
The Bible does not contradict itself.
Correct.
Right? And God does not contradict himself.
Right.
Also, we have to know that when you read the stories in the Bible, you don't read them in a vacuum, but in context of everything else that has happened and will happen in the Bible.
Right.
So when you read in Judges, you do kind of have to have an understanding of who the people of Israel were, where they came from, the covenant that God made with them. Mm-hmm. And you have to see where the fruition came in the New Testament,
right,
where Jephthah is being remembered as a father of the faith.
Correct.
Right.
You have to understand you have to understand Jephthah's whole history really to understand this story. And like you said, I think what truly is at stake, because this is what I've heard, is this is a text that proves that God is no different than the God of the Aztecs. So therefore this God is not a loving God. And therefore if this God is not a loving God, Jesus is not a loving sacrifice. It is a human sacrifice. You see what I'm saying? So it turns into this
cosmic child abuse.
Exactly right. It turns into this weird kind of what was that that movie with, it was like really gruesome, but it was about like the Amazon, not the Amazon, it was about like I think it was the Incas and the Mayans, and like and it's that guy who's like, he's captured and he's trying to get back to his.
Is it the Mel Gibson movie? Because he makes a lot of gruesome movies.
Is it Apocalypto or something?
Apocalypto,
Is that what it is? Yeah. Oh man,
I've not seen that.
Well, it's pretty. But like, this is the kind of God that they say, this is a verse that they say, see, your God is no different than that God.
Right.
So clearly Jesus is not, so like you said, this is another, the Bible doesn't contradict itself, but also the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are the same God.
Yes, they are.
So this is a way that some people will attack and say, see, no, they're not. So I think we have to understand that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So to begin to understand this, we first have to address, what is God's view on human sacrifice throughout all of Scripture?
Right.
And for that, let's just read some scriptures. So Leviticus 18:21, God says, "You shall not give any of your children to offer them to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." Okay, so this is this one actually pairs with Deuteronomy 18:10 as well. "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire." So this was something that was happening in the land of Canaan.
Right.
So they would sacrifice children. These were the Canaanites.
Right.
Okay. The peaceful people that had been burning their children alive for 450 years before God's judgment came upon them, and he drove them out with the people of Israel.
Right.
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 Just for the record.
If you are listening and not watching, he made some very big air quotes on peaceful.
Yeah.
Yes. Those poor people
But again,
who were slaughtering their own children.
And this is the number one thing that's levied against them,
right,
throughout all of Scripture, and this is also backed up by non-biblical texts that say
100%.
In fact, one of these texts suggests that when they would go out and sacrifice these babies, so there was a couple ways they would do it. Sometimes they would just pass them through the fire, which would be to put them directly into an oven.
Right.
But the Molech one was even more sadistic, where it was like a statue, a metal statue of like a bull with its hands out. Mm-hmm. And it was an oven, and they would ignite it, and the metal would heat up.
Ugh.
And they would put the babies in the hands,
right,
and the children in the hands of it, and they would sear, basically,
the child.
Right. And on days that this would happen, the drummers, and this was a misuse of God's most holy instrument.
I was going to say, well, you do not blaspheme the drums.
Would come out and play as loud as they could to drown out the screams of the children.
Sure.
Okay. So God right here says to do this, to sacrifice your children,
right,
Jephthah, is to profane the name of your God.
Yeah, that's a no-go.
That's a no-go.
Yeah, but these were peaceful people. I don't know if a lot of people don't know this. The people that God quote unquote massacres in the Bible, they're not subjectively evil, they're objectively evil.
That's right.
They're doing horrible things.
That's right. It would be like 2,000 years from now or 4,000 years from now, people being like, but the Nazis weren't that bad.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. There's going to be someone who's going to defend them. Yeah. Because that's what they're doing now. And so, yes, right off the bat, God is not a fan so far.
Right. So far, we've got that in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. He is not a fan of child sacrifice. Jeremiah 7:31. They have built the high places of Topheth, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, to burn their sons and their daughters in the fire, which I did not command, and it did not even come into my mind.
Right.
This is not his idea.
Right.
God is not okay with this.
Right.
Jeremiah 19.
I love how he said, didn't even come to my mind.
Right?
Yeah.
Jeremiah 19:4-7. Since they have abandoned me and have made this place foreign and have burned sacrifices in it to other gods that neither they nor their forefathers nor the kings of Judah had ever known, and since they have filled this place with the blood of the innocent and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, a thing which I did not command nor speak of, nor did it ever enter my mind. He says it again. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place will no longer be called Topheth or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but rather the valley of slaughter. And I will frustrate the planning of Judah and Jerusalem in this place, and I will make them fall by the sword before their enemies and by the hand of those who seek their life. And I will make their carcasses food for the birds of the sky and the animals of the earth. And praise God, good.
Can I just say, this is what a metal verse that is?
It's so brutal.
So brutal. Oh man. Yeah. The Valley of Slaughter is a Christian metal band if I've ever heard one. And then I will make their carcasses food for the birds of the sky and of the animals of the earth. I mean, but that just goes to show you the anger that God has for this unholiness.
Right. But is that not just judgment for people who slaughter their born children?
God is a protector and preserver of innocence.
Yeah.
He is the definer of it, right? I mean, He is innocent. And so anything is an affront to innocent, my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Ezekiel 23.
I hope they get more brutal.
Yeah. Ezekiel 23, 37-39. For they have committed adultery, and blood is on their hands. Which, by the way, adultery, and when God talks about his people committing adultery, he's talking about them worshiping other gods.
Yes.
So they have committed adultery with their idols and even made their sons, whom they bore to me, pass through the fire to them as food. Again, they have done this to me. They have defiled my sanctuary on the same day and have profaned my Sabbaths. For when they slaughtered their children for their idols, they entered my sanctuary on the same day to profane it. And behold, this is what they did within my house. So again, God uses very specific. Like we started there with, don't do this. It's profane to me.
Right. It's a very loving. Like, hey guys, this is not a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't kill your children.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it turns to, I have never commanded you to do this.
Right.
In fact, I have never even thought of it as a potential outcome of human existence. Like, this is not my intention for you and your children.
So if he hasn't thought of it, who has? See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's
if it's not coming from God, where's it coming from?
Exactly right. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's also antithetical to his first covenant, which was be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
Right. So he's pointing this out, and then he's saying, look, because you're doing it, judgment is upon you.
I'm going to wreck you.
I'm going to wreck you.
Yeah. It's going to be brutal.
It's going to be brutal. And some people struggle with this concept of a good judge God.
Sure.
But should evil not be condemned?
God has also got a consequence. You're either going to pay for your consequences in this life or in the next.
Right.
It's just a fact. And so to have this is, like you said, God is the author of justice, and a good God preserves justice.
Yeah.
And if it's not going to happen here, it's going to happen later.
Yeah. Now, something that we've talked about on this podcast before is substitutionary atonement.
Correct.
And this is something where, some people kind of misunderstand this concept of Jesus taking our place on the cross.
Right.
But God doesn't even permit human substitutionary atonement.
Correct.
He says in 2 Kings 14:6, But he did not put the sons of the murderers to death in obedience to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, as the Lord commanded, saying, the father shall not be put to death for the sons, nor the sons be put to death for the fathers, but each shall be put to death for his own sin.
Right.
So God's order is that we pay our own price.
Correct.
So what about Jesus?
Well, that's what makes Jesus special.
Right.
Right. Well, I think that's I think two things here. First off, we have to understand that even on the Day of Atonement, like the sacrificing Day of Atonement in Jewish history, right, there was never any talk of a human sacrifice being sufficient, right? It was a blameless lamb, right? So the criteria for a sacrifice to atone for all the sins of Israel was not a person.
Right.
Jesus is a person. I mean, let's be real. But he's more than this. Is a complete sacrificial atonement is a completely different thing than what we're.
Well, here's the thing: is there a man who is not worthy of death?
No, we all are.
Right. So we've all earned judgment.
Correct.
Right. Who hasn't?
Jesus is. That's what I'm saying. He is the sacrificial lamb.
Can you pay for somebody else's debt when you're in debt?
No.
No. So like there is a place to say like it doesn't make sense for me to take your place. Now there's a like in a human sense there's a and Jesus even says, like, what a great act for a man to lay his life down for
for his friends.
To sacrifice yourself. He's not talking about burnt sacrifice offerings. He's talking about putting others before you and laying yourself down for somebody else. That's a different thing.
Right.
It's way more different than me holding you accountable for your son's actions.
Right.
Or taking my kids and sacrificing them to other gods.
Right.
Or even trying to sacrifice them to the God.
Right. Right.
But I think the thing here is that what we see here is that God's character is built on this idea that it's unjust to kill the innocent.
Right.
He is not okay with killing innocent.
Right.
Right. And that is who he is. And we've just proved it over and over and over again. And we could pull more verses out, but he says it over and over again. One other thing to talk about here when we talk about human sacrifice, God gave very specific laws about sacrifice.
Correct.
Right. And it wasn't just don't make them human.
Right.
In Leviticus chapter 1,
yes,
that's the chapter that's all about the burnt offering,
right? Which
is what Jephthah offers, right? He offers a burnt offering. There are only 4 things that are mentioned as acceptable, which are goat, sheep, turtle doves, or young doves.
Right.
None of those are people.
Correct. Well,
but also, like I've heard a rabbi bring this up.
Right.
If a pig had come through the door, would that have been an acceptable burnt offering?
Right.
The answer is biblically no.
Right.
And he should have understood that.
Jephthah's whole demeanor is irresponsible in this whole thing. And I know we're going to touch on some of this, but his whole demeanor is irresponsible from the flippantly of, first off, I'm going to make a deal with God. Okay, that's a bold statement, Cotton. See how that pans out. Say that again, I know we said that a couple episodes ago, baby, but that, and then, I mean, the fact that I almost picture in this mind, he's like, all right, God, if you'll deliver me from my enemies and bring me home safe, whatever. And he just is kind of looking around and he's like, whatever walks through that door over there to my house. Like, it's almost like he's making it up as he goes.
He marches past Mizpah on his way to the battle.
Right. Yeah.
So he's seen his home recently, right?
So it's just like, okay, where could it be? Like, of all the things he picks that. And so I think that's crazy. But I also think back to just another thing I want to say about the sacrificial atonement of Jesus. Jesus was not a burnt offering.
That's another truth.
He was never burned alive.
He was not a sacrifice in the sense of sacrifice.
That we're the sacrifice that we're talking about today and the sacrifice that Jesus makes, two completely different things.
His atonement was not a ritual sacrifice.
Exactly right. Yeah, and it wasn't performed by the Jews, and it wasn't. Well, we can argue that, I guess. Technically, it was the Romans. It was the Romans who crucified him, and they crucified him. So it was not. He was dead before his body was pierced.
And beside that, he did that for both the Romans and the Jews.
Yes.
So we don't say those things to like.
No, not to cast shame on anybody. No, because we're technically the Romans in this story.
Yes.
But I want that to be very clear, because when people come at this and say, well, see, Jesus is just a dad who's angry killing his kid. No. This is way bigger than that. Jephthah's just an idiot who sacrifices his daughter. And we're going to tell you, unnecessarily.
Yes. Yeah, spoiler.
Yeah.
If you haven't caught on yet,
We're not fans.
we're not fans of what Jephthah does here. And as we're pointing out, we don't believe the Bible condones his actions.
No, not at all.
And I would even go so far as to say it's not that we don't believe that the Bible condones it. It's that when you read the Bible, it doesn't condone his actions.
Well, look, if you just go back and you even read the story in Judges,
Yeah.
everything after he makes that promise with God, there is no interaction between he and God.
It's all him.
It's all him at that point. So we don't even know what God is quote unquote thinking and or saying here. Let's be real.
Neither is Jephthah.
No. But what he does know is he's made this promise and this is where he's got. But what we do know from everything else that has happened before Judges, right? So Leviticus, Deuteronomy, I couldn't say this. These all are prejudged books.
Yeah.
We do know that this is their stance on human sacrifice.
Yeah.
So even he should know that even this sacrifice is unacceptable.
Yeah. He should know.
He should know.
Yeah.
Now, there's some dilemma in there when you know who he is.
Right. And he was technically run out of the land.
Right.
But still, who was around him? There should have been something here. So
And he didn't hear her tambourine coming. Be real. He didn't hear that tambourine coming and be like, yo, stay inside. Like, don't come out. Like,
it might have been one of those things where it's like, oh, it's my daughter. And then she comes out and it's like, oh, shoot.
oh, shoot. Yeah.
That thing that I said.
Send Jeff out.
Yeah. Send Jeff.
Get Jeff out here.
Jeff the pig. Okay, so let's talk about this now.
Right.
So we've talked about God does not approve of human sacrifice.
No.
And he had very strict rules in the Old Testament for what should be offered as a burnt sacrifice. Right. How does he feel about oaths and promises? Mm-hmm. Right? So